Welcome, folks. Good afternoon. Give people a chance to log on and join in. But we're so excited for this really rich discussion. Feel free to put in the chat where you're calling in from and introduce yourself as we give folks a chance to join and log on. We'll get started in just a few moments. Welcome, everyone. We're just giving a chance for people to log in, and we'll get started in just a few moments. All right, I think we will go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with where you are coming from, where you're calling in from. We're so excited to welcome you to part one of our Improving Student Access to Empowering Rigorous Content webinar series hosted by the Alliance for Resource Equity. As a bit of background or maybe a refresher for those that have joined these webinars before, the Alliance for Resource Equity is focused on making sure that school systems and communities are working together to mobilize the right combination of supports and resources to ensure that all students have access to high quality learning experiences. It's a partnership between Education Trust and education resource strategies. And we do this by thinking about 10 dimensions of resource equity to help district leaders and advocates work together to consider equitable resource distribution and allocation. We're so excited to do a deep dive into one of these 10 dimensions with this webinar series around empowering rigorous coursework and content. And we know that this is highly applicable to what we're seeing happening in classrooms all across the country. We know that for all of our students to navigate the increasingly complex worlds, contribute to an inclusive society, and achieve their own biggest dreams, that all starts in the classroom. So the books that our students read, the curriculum and corresponding instruction, the rigor of the content and coursework opportunities all play a role in providing that foundation for future success for all our students. So over the course of these next 3 weeks, we'll discuss how empowering rigorous content is a key component to resource equity. And our goal is to provide you with new resources and tools and considerations on a range of topics that all have to do with this dimension of resource equity to use in your own advocacy and policy priorities. So today we are so lucky to be joined by my colleague, Kristen Hengen. She'll lead us in this conversation around why middle school is a crucial time for students to develop college and career aspirations. And she'll share out findings from her new brief on access to advanced coursework in middle school specifically, including how to foster STEM identities for Black and Latino students and students from low-income backgrounds. Then we'll introduce our amazing panelists, Dorothy and Joe, and they'll offer their insights as practitioners involved in this work on the ground in Maryland. The one last thing I'll note is that we will have time for Q&A. So go ahead and use the Q&A function throughout the conversation, and we'll circle back at the end and address those questions. But for now, I think I'll hand things over to Kristen.
Great. Thanks so much, Shayna. And we'll go ahead and jump in. So as Shayna said, my name is Kristen Hengen. I'm a senior policy analyst with the Education Trust in our DC office, and I lead our work on college and career readiness. And a big part of that is access to rigorous and advanced coursework for students of color and students from low-income backgrounds. So I'm so excited to jump in today and share a little bit from my recent brief, as Shayna previewed, as well as talk to some fabulous panelists who are on the ground doing really great work to extend students' learning in STEM specifically in the middle school time in Maryland. So we can look forward to that. But in today's webinar, we'll talk a little bit about some barriers that are currently present for students learning and engagement in STEM, and also some promising practices. We'll talk to our fabulous panelists. They'll share out a little bit about their experience, and I'll have a chat with them. There'll be time at the end for questions from the audience, so please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll address them towards the end of the webinar. And finally, we hope that you'll consider how you can extend access to really exciting and engaging STEM opportunities in your district or your state. So I know they've been previewed a couple times, and they'll be sharing with you shortly, but please look out for Dorothy and Joe, who will share right after me a little bit about their really innovative partnership with a local museum in our backyard of Bethesda, Maryland, the Kid Museum, and Montgomery County Public Schools, which is the largest district in Maryland, the largest school district. So they've come together to really enrich students' STEM opportunities, engagement with this fantastic program called Invent the Future, where they're empowering students to look around their communities and address problems that they're seeing and consider how they can be change makers themselves. So Dorothy and Joe are coming shortly, but first I'll go ahead and jump into, oh, you know what, we're gonna do a quick Menti. So if you want to join this Menti on your phone, you can take this screenshot or QR code, or you can go to menti.com and use code 21440768. So we'll do two short little polls just to get us started and jump into this. So once again, last chance to grab that QR code if you want to scan on your phone, or the code will stay up here. So I'm curious, when do you first feel like you first belonged or didn't belong in math, science, or STEM? So I want to ground us in that important feeling of belongingness and think about your own experience. So you can add in a few words, a phrase, a little open-ended. We'll take a few moments here. Again, that's at menti.com with code 21440768. And I hope I see some answers pop up. But as we're waiting, I'll share a little bit about my own experience. In 7th grade, I didn't test into the advanced class in 8th grade, even though most of my friends did. QR code is for, okay. So we have 2 questions. And for this star, you know, if it doesn't work out, fair enough, you can always add your answer in the chat. But I didn't test into my advanced class in 8th grade like a lot of my friends did in math. And I picked up that message really clearly that I wasn't really a math person. Math wasn't really for me. It kind of confirmed some ideas I already had. And that was okay. And the other side of the story is that my mom was a teacher in the district and went to the principal and advocated for me to be put in that advanced math class in 8th grade. And ultimately, I was put in that class and stayed in my advanced math trajectory in high school. So that really shows the power of what decisions that are happening in middle school can say to a student in their own identity, but also the power of advocacy in parents and communities knowing the importance of opportunities that students may have in their school. So, okay, if that Menti didn't work and is leading you to another question, my many apologies, and I hope that it's leading to this question. So I already have a great word cloud here. What would it take for students to all feel a sense of belonging in their middle school math and science classrooms? Let's set the table for the reality of what many schools can and do look like, but also be grounded in the research that tells us that many students, and especially students of color, students with disabilities, and girls, say they're less likely to feel like they belong in the STEM classroom. So I hope today we can consider the opportunities we have in schools and districts and communities to get more students to feel like they belong. And I'm seeing fun, joy, innovation, energy, strength. I love what I'm seeing. Empowerment, beautiful, calm, confidence. A lot of awesome words here to consider. What would this look like? Student agency, inclusivity, engagement, the importance of 3rd grade. Oh, this is super fun. Okay, I could watch it all day. But let's move on. Feel free to keep adding to that and I'll take a peek after, and I appreciate you jumping right in. Okay, let's go ahead and dig a little further into why we're talking about middle school today. So what we found in researching for our recent brief was that middle school is a critical moment for students' identity formation. So this is both as a person, but also as a college-going person. So research really says that a lot of students decide whether or not they're a college-going person in 7th and 8th grade. So it's not to say they can't decide at another time, but students are kind of coming up with that identity and confirming that identity. So if that's true, that's really important to support students and get them engaged in their classrooms. And we also found that research shows students develop and strengthen STEM identity in middle school as well. So STEM identity is something like, I am a science person, right? I am a math girl. This class is for me. This is my spot. This is where all my people are. I walk into the classroom and I know this is my place. So if students are developing this identity in middle school, that's also really crucial. We're really swimming in waters that are essential to setting students up for futures in STEM, because STEM identity formation is a predictor of middle school students' academic learning in STEM and identification with STEM-related careers. So if something isn't happening in middle school, or if students are saying, I'm not really a STEM person, that class is not really for me, I'm not relating to this content, I don't see me in the class, students may be closing off opportunities for themselves. When I was picking up the message that I wasn't really a math person, I never once in my life considered that I might be an engineer in my future. I just closed that door for myself. I didn't really consider it because of what I decided my own identity was. So we want to make sure we're opening up future opportunities for students, because we know the stronger the sense of belonging in STEM, the stronger the students' academic outcomes in STEM. And this is really important when we're thinking about getting students ready and interested on their college and career pathways. So let's go ahead and discuss what we believe at Ed Trust and talk a little bit about what's actually happening. So at the Education Trust, we believe all middle school students should have access to high quality, rigorous, relevant, fun, joyful, engaging STEM courses, right? All the things that we saw in that word cloud. And all schools should have equitable policies in place for enrolling students in advanced courses. So we know many schools have advanced math. That's where we actually have federal data on access to algebra in middle school, which is an advanced class. Many schools and districts also have things like advanced science. So when schools have those classes, we need equitable admissions and enrollment policies to get students into those classes when they're showing ready and eagerness. Not that these are based on teacher recommendation, which often means that students of color are not as likely to be enrolled in these classes. So we have some numbers from our 2020 report, Inequities in Advanced Coursework, in the upper right here, that found that we're missing over 100,000 Black and Latino students in 8th grade algebra courses that should be in there, because of many reasons that we could talk about for a really long time, and see my report if you want to dig into them. But we really know that one of the issues that's shutting students of color out of algebra in middle school and contributing to a feeling that they may not belong in those classes is unrepresentative curriculum. So let's note that advanced courses are really important. Research shows that students in advanced courses are more likely to be engaged, are more likely to graduate, less likely to be absent, less likely to be suspended. So if there are students who are ready and eager to be in these advanced classes and can experience these benefits, but they're being shut out because they feel like the math and science classroom is unwelcoming to them, or they feel like it's exclusionary to their identities, right? The curriculum may be passive, decontextualized, not relevant to their lives, rote. Students may struggle to see themselves as that math or science person, really struggle to have the sense of belonging in math, or envision a future in STEM. So this is really important, considering that we want all students to feel like they belong and are STEM people, but also considering the inequities that we already have with Black and Latino students in advanced math classes. Unrepresentative curriculum is a part of that. So on the flip side, we know that high quality, culturally sustaining, student-centered STEM curricula that connects students' identities with their content can help them both feel like they belong in the class, but also acquire deeper understandings of the concepts and develop a positive STEM identity. So when we're thinking about fostering that positive STEM identity in middle school, algebra in middle school may be one way to extend students' opportunities in STEM, and yet we're dealing in this reality of inequity. I'll just keep this really brief. Students who take algebra in middle school have more opportunities to excel in advanced math in high school, as most advanced math trajectories begin in middle school. And conversely, unequal access to algebra in middle school deepens inequities students experience in high school and has ramifications for college access, attainment, and STEM career pathways. So we could talk about this all day, but because most advanced high school math trajectories begin in middle school, inequitable access for students of color means that ready and eager students of color are shut out of this pathway and opportunities that can potentially help connect them to STEM futures. So we've talked about the problem. We've talked about a little bit about why it's important. And let's go ahead and shine a light on some folks doing really great work. So we have partners E3 Alliance in Central Texas who work with districts around them. They have a really strong data collection and reporting website, and they share data with districts. And they shared some really concerning data where they found that just 1 out of 3 Black students and about half Latino students in Central Texas who were scoring at the highest level on the 5th grade math exam, so they're showing readiness, they're super strong math students, had completed the advanced class by 8th grade, despite having demonstrated readiness. So when E3 shared this to district leaders shared that this didn't necessarily shock them. It wasn't something they didn't know, but the data was the type of data they couldn't look away from. So putting a spotlight to the issue helped move action. Districts worked together to troubleshoot this issue and met regularly and shared how they were going to try to address this. And they found that strategies like promoting the advantages of advanced math to families, automatically enrolling students in advanced courses, and offering training to teachers and school counselors helped change things in these districts. So there are other things districts have the power to change: their enrollment policies, district scheduling, course sequencing, to help prepare all students to enroll and succeed in advanced courses in middle school. So there's some really exciting data in that 3rd bullet point that you can note that participation for Black and Latino students in Central Texas leapfrogged after districts, tried to address this issue. And districts really must ensure that their policies and pathways prepare more students to reach opportunities that may lead them to future STEM pathways. So in our brief on fostering STEM identities in middle school, we have a couple policy recommendations for state leaders, but also districts. And they won't surprise you, right? We need more data to shine a light on where inequities are. Districts can and should adopt high quality instructional methods and professional development and ensure they're investing in things like school curriculum that's relevant to students' life and is engaging and enjoyable, more school counselors, policies that are equitably enrolling more students of color, and really working with families so families are aware of what why it's important to have strong STEM identities, what opportunities there may be in their district. And for district leaders interested in more of these, we have an amazing resource, and it's the Alliance for Resource Equity's Guidebook on Empowering Rigorous Content. And it's just full of other ideas and great ways to think about getting more students set up for futures in STEM if they so desire. So that was my quick and dirty for my recent brief. Feel free to check it out, but let's actually turn to go on the ground and hear about a really exciting partnership that's happening in Maryland between a school district and a museum. I'm going to turn it over to Dorothy Jones Davis at the Kid Museum. Dorothy, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Thanks to you and Shayna for having me here. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what Kid Museum is. So Kid Museum is an equity-driven educational nonprofit. Our mission is to equip youth of diverse backgrounds with the skills needed to thrive in the future. And through that sustained learning experiences that we provide for students that deliver results, KID is an innovation partner offering inventive curriculum and program for school districts, for teachers, kids, and their families. Next slide, please. So a little bit about KID and our philosophy. Our learning philosophy is grounded in maker education, and I apologize. I think the slides are showing a little differently than they are on my end. So I apologize for the coloration differences. But our learning philosophy is really based on the mind of a maker. And what you'll notice about our philosophy, it has 8 different components. And while one of those components is skill building, specific skills around building, around different competencies as it relates to coding or particular subject areas, our work is really looking to develop mindsets that are beyond basic skills. These are skills that are around imagination, reflection, perseverance, exploration, initiative, teamwork, and perspective taking. And all of these are mindsets that are necessary for our students to learn in a 21st century environment, and to gather skill sets that will help them work with one another, to have perspective taking, to show initiative and imagination, to be able to use the skills that they learn to actually invent a future. So next slide, please. So a little bit about our ecosystem of learning. In Kid Museum, using Maker Learning, we have 3 sort of different buckets that represent the largest focus. One is our student programs and curriculum. These are direct delivery programs that are aligned to our state, national and state standards, as well as our teacher professional development. I think Jo has been a part of a lot of our teacher professional development, and so I think she'll probably reflect a little bit about that. As well as engagement beyond the school day. So while we have rich programming happening in school, the curriculum that KID delivers within school, we also have engagement with families outside of school in our out of school time learning. This allows for us to have a continuum of learning both in school and out of school, during the day, after school, during the summer, on days off, in classrooms, at KID here, at home, for kids and their families and their educators, that spans elementary, middle, and high school. So what does this look like? Next slide. When we look at our partnership with Montgomery County Public Schools, and I will say and stress that this only represents, this slide here, a fraction of the work that we are doing, but is a part of the case study today. When you look at what we're doing, as you can see, it takes place in school. Again, we have 2 main programs that are happening in school with Montgomery County Public Schools, an elementary program called Kid Inventors, which are grades 2 through 5, and then our middle school program, which I'll speak to you a little bit more about today, our Invent the Future course. That happens in school where we're providing curriculum, we're providing professional development for educators, we're providing resources for schools and districts to succeed, to give additional attention to STEM subjects. In addition, we have out of school time experiences that span either after school, like our Kid After School program, perhaps school day out. So many schools have days off, and those days off, we invite people to come to KID, and we have curriculum around that. As well as offerings for Invent the Future, which I'll talk to you a little bit more about, in a club offering, which is a little more informal than the in-school programming. We also have a teen apprentice program, which extends our learning beyond middle school into our teen years, and our summer programming. You might be able to hear there are some camps going on. We also have professional development going on for educators, as well as Maker Math, which is an offering that we've developed to help to supplement the COVID learning losses that have occurred in mathematics, as Kristen alluded to, with students, particularly students of color and students from low income and Title I schools. In our school system for Invent the Future, I want to give you a little bit of background before I dive into the program. The program started in one school. We had a school that approached us with some students that were showing learning loss or some gaps in learning. It is a school that actually has a magnet program that is specifically geared towards STEM. In that particular school, we started out with one classroom. In that classroom, the teacher and the principal at that school asked the basic question. We have a magnet program. We have students that are engaging in STEM, and similar to what Kristen said, some of the students at that school were not engaging in STEM in the same way. They were not being tracked to particular classes that were the higher level classes. And the question was, why? Can we do something about it? And so together with Kid Museum, we partnered to create the program that's now known as Invent the Future, and really started to wrap around educational experiences for students that needed to have that additional supplementation of STEM subjects. And as you can imagine, after that exposure, those students then started to see themselves in STEM, as Kristen mentioned, and then we started to replicate that. So after our first year, we grew to be in a larger cohort of schools, and now we're proud to say that we're in over 20 schools. We've competitively bid our contract with Montgomery County Public Schools to have this contract that has a lot of different types of learning occurring, but the Invent the Future program, our middle school program, is in fact very, very strong. So moving on to the next slide. So what is the Invent the Future program? Well, the Invent the Future program, as I said before, occurs in sort of two different formats. We have the Invent the Future course that is in grades 6 through 8. In this course, students are asked a very basic question: what will you make to improve life on this planet? And in that course, we give students, through their educators, a rich curriculum. It's a full semester course with over 55 hours of curriculum in the course. Our educators come and they have 2 full day, they have professional development that is given to them. And then they have 2 full day workshops that the students come having built and worked on their projects to Kid Museum to continue to build at Kid Museum. And what that does is that allows them to have access to the tools and technologies here at Kid. A lot of them are not usually exposed to these different types of equipment, this type of learning. And so coming to Kid Museum allows them to really use tools in a way that promotes learning. At the end of the entire program, there is a community showcase event. And in that showcase event, we're partnered with a number of different community partners that come to view, to talk to students, to mentor students, and to review students and give feedback on their projects that they've created. The other version of the Invent the Future program is our club model. This model is very, very similar in that it still engages grades 6 through 8. This, however, is either in school, after school, as a club. And so this only has 15 or so hours of curriculum that is provided, but there are lots of teacher add-ons, and many teachers across Montgomery County Public Schools have actually worked together to make the program their own. And so again, the students will come to 2 full day workshops at Kid Museum, again, providing that additional wraparound instruction, providing teacher professional development again for those teachers, and there still is a community showcase event. And so in this program, the goals of the program are really 5-fold. So the first is, of course, to increase STEM representation and engagement amongst our lower income students of color, especially as they prepare for high school. So this program is targeted towards Title I schools within Montgomery County Public Schools. We prioritize Title I schools as a intentional opportunity to make sure that students of color and students that have meager resources are able to see themselves in STEM. This really also, our second goal is really to control the mentality that, you know, somehow STEM is not for me. This is both in our students and in our teachers, because what we've noted is that in beginning the program, sometimes teachers don't feel like maybe STEM was the subject that they were great in or that they enjoyed. And so we want to combat that mentality that STEM subjects are not for students and not for teachers, giving them the confidence that they can do STEM, right? So we know one of the things that happens programs, and Kristen alluded to this, is that students are told or alluded to that they're not good at STEM, they're not good at math, they're not good at these different subjects. And they may not see people in these fields that look like them. And so how do we combat that? By allowing students to see themselves as those change makers, as folks that can use these different skills, these different mindsets to actually come up with a solution to a problem within their community. We also have a goal of modeling and expanding our deeper experiential, joyful learning in schools. I was so glad to see the word joyful pop up in our word cloud, because a lot of times we unfortunately have sapped out the fun of education in our students in middle school as we try to drill in these different subjects. And so having maker learning that's joyful, that is filled with fun, interrogation and exploration, is really allowing students to see themselves joyfully making a change in the world. We really want to develop that mind of a maker. That's our fourth goal, really to try to make sure that kids have all of the tools and really feel that agency to drive forward change in the world. And finally, we want to expand our educator capacity and their comfort with STEM and maker learning. We want them to feel comfortable with delivering STEM, doing it in a way that is culturally responsive and sustaining to students, and giving them the joy that they have in seeing their students succeed. Next slide, please. So what is the impact of this program? Well, Kid Museum has nearly 2,000 middle school participants in the Invent the Future program each year. As I said before, we have about 21 mostly high need middle schools in Montgomery County, Maryland participating. 70% of our students are Black and Latino, and more than half of our students qualify for free or reduced price lunch at school. And what we found is that our educators, when surveyed, and I know Joe will talk a little bit more about this, 94% of our educators reported an increase in their students' engineering confidence and skills. So we're seeing a demonstrated change in students as reported by their teachers. 88% of educators reported an increase in their students' skills and technology. 81% reported an increase in their students' critical thinking skills. And 94% of educators reported an increase in their students' perseverance. So we're seeing demonstrable change in our students from participating in these programs. And additionally, we're seeing that our partners, we've been lucky to have partnership from Google, from Pepco, which is our regional electric utility, Maryland Higher Education System, our biotech industry, and other partners galvanizing, because they see the prospect of this program as being a program that does develop those change makers, those students that will go on to pursue college and career and to be the change makers of the world. Really, they're coming up with that solution for how will we make life better on this planet. And that's really what we need when we're thinking about the problems that we're facing today, whether it be climate change, whether it be other really large and complex problems. We need students that not only have STEM competencies in the most explicit sense, that is, tested, but also students that are developing a larger framework for understanding problems, not being daunted by them, and being able to address those complex issues in a meaningful way. Next slide. So what makes this work? Well, really, we think there are 5 main aspects that make this work. Honestly, the first is that it's open to all. We don't have prerequisites or tracks. These elective options are open to schools, and they're really widely publicized. We work with schools to publicize to students and families so that any student that has any sort of interest in STEM or interest in inventing the future can participate in the program. The second is that we provide high quality instructional materials. These materials are aligned to state standards, and we do focus on an individual school's needs. So we do cater the program to individual schools, really weighing what are their needs, what is their student population, and what are they looking for in a program. The third is professional development for teachers. I'm not putting words in Joe's mouth, but I know Joe has been a very big part of all of our different professional development opportunities and has taken advantage of them. But what we've heard from educators like Joe is that they need their own confidence boost. They really do want to learn and feel more comfortable teaching STEM. And so we try to rally around them, giving a whole cadre of not just instructional materials and curriculum, but a support network, so that when they have challenges in the classroom, if they're facing a question about how do I approach this topic with my students have come up with this, what can I do? We're able to bolster that. We also provide infrastructure to support students' interest. So when you bring students here, we have 28,000 square feet in our makerspace. And again, we boast lots of tools and materials that students typically don't have access to. So whether it's using a laser cutter, or whether it's using a scroll saw, or whether it's coming in and being able to use computers to code and having competency around coding and using things like microbit, we have it, and we're happy to teach students how to use those as a part of their ever expanding toolbox that will allow them to have the agency and the knowledge to have an impact in the future. One thing that one of our speakers said, and I'll close with this, at Invent the Future, this is Deja Taylor. She's 19 years old and came up with color changing sutures that detect an infection when she was in high school. She said age is by no means defines when you cannot invent. And so I think that that's something to really think about. I think a lot of times we try to tell students, oh, you're too young to do this. And so here at Kid Museum, we say, no, please tell us your ideas and help us help you make them a reality. Next slide. So that's all I have. And if you're in the area, we would love to see you. We're in Bethesda, Maryland, right above the Bethesda Metro. Please do visit us. And if you want to reach out to me, please feel free to. I'd be happy to take questions after this, and also by email. Oh, you can skip those. Thanks, Kristen.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dorothy. And we'll go ahead and switch to Joe now. So I see you, Joe.
Hello. I'm not showing up on mine. So hi, my name is Joe Bellier Dorman. And as they've mentioned, I've worked with Kid Museum for over 6 years now. I'm a STEM educator in a middle school in Montgomery County. We are predominantly a Title I school, so we have predominantly Black and Latino students who are fixed and reduced meals. And this is my 20th year teaching STEM, either in elementary or middle school. You can go ahead and do next slide. Thank you. I also have led a program for girls to kind of focus them in, to have them explore engineering and careers. I've done that for over 15 years. And currently with Kid Museum, I'm part of their Teach for the Future cohort that just started this summer. And so that wraps into the professional development. Kid Museum has always been absolutely wonderful, helping teachers develop their STEM skills and competencies and confidence. And so I'm excited to be a part of that inaugural cohort. Go ahead and do the next slide, please. So Dorothy's touched on Mind of a Maker. I think this is what really makes Kid Museum stand out in their Invent the Future, because as a teacher, we're always told that we're trying to teach 21st century skills. And in a regular classroom, if you are just focusing on one particular content area, English, science, math, whatever it is, social studies, getting these social emotional skills into your content is really difficult. But the way that Kid Museum has their curriculum laid out, you get to focus a lesson on a particular skill set. And so we are really kind of teaching those everyday soft skills that are going to make these kids not only college bound, but they're also going to make them better humans, better adults in the future. And so I really can't speak enough about the Mind of a Maker. When I do my objectives on the board, I always choose one of the skill sets for us to focus on that week. And so the kids will know and do a reflection on a particular skill set for Mind of a Maker. Go ahead and next slide. So the Invent the Future Challenge I've done, like I said, for over 6 years. I was in one of the first actual showcases. I was not in that first school that started working with Kid Museum, but I was in the second school that started working with Kid Museum. So I've been with them and seen them develop along the way. The Invent the Future Challenge offers opportunities for all students, regardless of their level. I have taught both the class level, so I teach a semester course called Invent the Future, but I've also taught or led the Invent the Future Club, and that is open to anyone in our school. And so kids who are not even taking STEM classes have been involved in that, so they can all touch this challenge. It is project-based learning because they are all answering the prompt, what can you do to improve life on this planet? And because that prompt is so open-ended, the kids really get to explore what they have a personal interest in. And they kind of migrate into teams of like interest. And so one of the things we found coming out of COVID was that students had difficulty interacting with one another in teamwork because they've been sitting home on a computer all by themselves. My students didn't have that difficulty because during COVID, we continued on with Invent the Future with the Kid Museum, and Kid Museum sent home to all my students maker kits. And so students still built and did engineering and still answered the prompt, what can you do to improve life on this planet? And they worked in small groups online in rooms together to do the same thing. And so they learned that solving a problem doesn't just happen at school or at the Kid Museum, but they could do that anywhere at any time, even in their own home. So the other thing is that Invent the Future really does help with those critical thinking skills. They have to research their problem. They have to understand their problem. They have to be able to decide the solution they came up with, does that actually solve their problem? And so they all learn the engineering design process and have to go back through, and they have many iterations of all of their projects. And so it teaches them persistence as well. She touched on, Dorothy touched on a little bit about the end result, working with their partners to be interviewed by engineers. But along the way, we've had real life engineers come in and talk to the kids and have webinars with them. And so they can kind of bounce ideas off of those engineers to see, is their solution something that's feasible? And getting feedback along the way has been really important for the kids to see. And it also gives them ownership, like the quote about you, it doesn't matter your age. They get really positive feedback, and some of the engineers are blown away by some of these kids' ideas. Their ideation is amazing. And as far as honing their technical skills, again, they're going through the engineering design process the entire time they're doing the Invent the Future. They do learn coding. So we have done Scratch, Python, and microbit coding. And so those kids who may not like the physical building part, but they like to code, are kind of hooked into this program. There is cardboard construction. When they go to the museum, they learn to use scroll saws. They learn all sorts of different techniques on how to create things with cardboard. We do 3D printing. They learn to use circuits. And then for my kids, I've kind of added this layer in. All of our final projects are always done via video. So they learn how to edit and video production. And so it's one of those programs that really incorporates everything they learn in school. So it's not just STEM, it's STEAM. They get to do some art in there too, but they have to use their English. They have to use social studies because they're looking at what are societal problems. They have to use science. They have to use math. And so the program itself, I can't stress enough how encompassing it is, and kind of puts together a lot of pieces kids might not connect if they're going from math to English. They may not see the connection there. This particular program helps them make those connections. There were a couple of quotes I wanted to, some anecdotes. Every year before we go on the field trips, I always say, this is, you guys are going to love this. This is a great field trip. This is the best field trip. And 9 times out of 10, I'll get one kid who will say to me, Mrs. Dorman, this was so much fun. I thought you were talking about teacher fun. This is like kid fun. So the Kid Museum has always offered just some really great hands-on things that we get to bring back into our classroom that the kids absolutely love. And then the last one was, I had a kid sign up for Invent the Future last year who had just moved from Uruguay. And he said he was looking through the course catalog and he saw the title of the class, Invent the Future. And he said, I said to myself, I'm an inventor. I like to invent the future. That's the class for me. And so that's why he signed up, and he absolutely thrived and is now moving on to high school and is on the STEM track in high school this next year. So I have to say that kid has been nothing but very helpful as an educator to getting kids hooked into looking at STEM careers. I have kids who have gone on to do the STEM focus in high school. And now I have kids who from my first cohort are starting to go into engineering programs in college. So all of those goals that Dorothy put up, they certainly have, I've seen them come to light with their program. So with that, if anybody has any questions, or I'll hand it back over to Kristen.
Okay, fantastic. And I cannot be the only person in the room who wishes they were in the Invent the Future program right now. So I really appreciate that, both you, Dorothy and Joe, for sharing. And now for the rest of the time, we have about 15 minutes to do some questions. And so I know we've been getting some questions in the chat. Please keep those coming. And I'll start with one question that came through from Shannon about, how do you provide additional academic supports for students in the programs? And I think probably both Dorothy and Joe can speak to this. So additional academic supports for students.
Yeah, I mean, I will defer to Joe a bit about how she does it in the classroom. But I think one of the things that's really unique about KID is that we don't look at each experience sort of as an only thing, right? So we want to see kids as much as possible. And so I know I put up the slide really quickly and there was a lot on my slide, so you may have missed it, but we have a lot of other programs going on, and we make sure that students know about the other opportunities that exist here at KID. So we have some kids that do come after school in addition to doing the Invent the Future course in their classes. We have students that continue on once they become teenagers and join our teen apprentice program, where they might get deeper learning. We have our MCPS. We've done a partnership with MCPS to have family days, which are subsidized days. So through the end of the summer, you can come to Kid Museum for free if you're an MCPS student, and that encourages them to come with family as well to provide additional support to students and additional opportunities to continue to use these skill sets that they've gathered in the Invent the Future program. We additionally work with educators to try to figure out ways to provide a support. The course is the course that we are delivering, so we don't have as much access into other classes that the students might be taking. But to the extent that is possible, we do work with educators to try to help with providing them with the knowledge and the skill sets they need to be able to support students additionally on their projects. And as you can imagine, these projects, while most of the building happens in class, for especially the club model, students are doing this outside of school as well. So they need a little bit of extra support from folks to make sure that happens. Joe, I don't know if you wanted to chime in about what's happening in class to help with academic support.
So I can just give you some anecdotal things. Kids that might struggle academically, maybe in math and science, what teachers are coming to me and saying is that, oh, they finally put it together that what they do in here is going to affect them in other places. And so because Invent the Future is so hands-on, I tend to get kids who might not do so well academically outside of my class, who this does start to help them realize that, oh, I do need to know math in order to do what I want to do hands-on. And so I know I need to know how to do measurement. I need to know how to do multiplication and all of that kind of things to be able to figure out what I want to build. And so just anecdotally, I oftentimes get the really tough kids that teachers are like, oh, I can't believe you're bringing them out of the building. I'm like, oh, they are going to be great. And they do. They really kind of thrive and finally see themselves as someone who can make things. So it's a win-win in terms of it helps their academics, but mostly I see it as helping their self-esteem and making them see themselves as a problem solver, because oftentimes in classes, they're just given the information and they don't know what to do with that. In our classes, they get to actually apply what they're learning. So.
Yeah, and I actually missed that point when I was going through. I realized after, as Joe was talking, that I missed that point. I mean, the way this is designed is that it's relevant to students' lives, and that is actually by design. So we design this so that kids can, we don't give them a menu of here are the problems in the world you need to solve. We give them the agency so that they can decide, okay, here's a problem that's important to me. And then we give them the skill sets to help solve that problem. But we don't tell them how they're going to do it. So they really do work through, and I think Joe's absolutely right. Math is a great example. A lot of times kids may not be really strong at math, but then they realize, okay, I have to measure, I have to, as Joe said, I have to know the multiplication, I have to figure it out. And working together in teams, they also can see other people's perspectives. So they might have a student that's stronger in math and is like, oh no, let me show you how to do this. And another kid will be like, okay, I understand now how I can use this skill. And I think a lot of times it's not intentional, but in the classroom, we're so busy trying to teach a particular concept that we don't necessarily contextualize it all the time, or we give a context that maybe is a little artificial. It's not as natural as when, oh, I'm measuring something, I need to use math. And we're not even telling them you're using math, they're just doing it. And so then when they go back to their math class and they're asked sort of to do the same thing in that artificial context, they're able to translate. And that's one of the most beautiful things, is to really see kids that really, hadn't been considered as strong students, start to sort of move the needle. And in that first cohort, that's actually what we saw, is that students that had been deemed as going to one sort of trajectory were now able to go into a trajectory that was different.
That is so powerful and really exciting. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about what's the power of the middle school as a moment to hook students into like, oh, actually, I like STEM now, or I'm seeing myself differently in this context.
Yeah, I mean, I think that middle school, you spoke a lot to this in your introduction. It's just a powerful time for identity in general, identity formation. And I think that, it's such a difficult time in a lot of ways. And students really are making very strong opinions about how they're going to pursue life, like what's going to happen in their lives. And so I just think it's a really powerful moment to get them to reconsider themselves. A lot of times they're basing the notion of who they are on what other people are telling them. And I think one of the most powerful things about the maker experience and maker learning is that you're forging your own identity. And just like you're molding some clay, you're molding yourself, right? And you're seeing what I can do, what I have agency to do. I know that moment you talked about, your moment, my moment was in 8th grade. A teacher told me that she saw me as someone who could do well in STEM. She thought I was really great at science as my science teacher. And she told me, I think you could be a scientist. And having someone say that to me telling me, oh, I think you could be the president of our science club, that changed my trajectory, and that I got a PhD in neuroscience. And I still thank that 8th grade teacher for saying, she doesn't remember this conversation, right? That it actually even happened, but I think it's so powerful. So having kids see themselves using the tools, knowing, hey, I'm making something, and having, for example, a Pepco or a Google say to you, someone from those organizations, wow, that's a really amazing idea. That could really change the world. We had one of the Pepco representatives for a child who was in the January, the first semester cohort. She actually said to that child, you know, this is something that Pepco could use. And the kids' faces like on that team were like, oh my God, Pepco could use our idea, but that's what they need. And I don't know if they'll go off and become, you know, STEM majors or go into STEM. And that's not really the goal. The goal is for them to know that they could do whatever they put their mind to, and that they have a toolbox that if STEM is one of the things they want to pursue, yes, they can do that. And they have the competency to do so.
I would agree with that. Middle school is such a identity, trying to figure out who you are. And I have to say that I've seen students who come in and do not see themselves as STEM kids at all, just blossom in this environment and go on into high school and kind of go that engineering math path. But then some of them don't, but they still come back and say, but I still see myself as a maker. I realize that I am a problem solver. And so I do have to, the story about Pepco reminded me there were earlier versions of some of the things that from Invent the Future I've seen this summer are now patented and coming out. So it's like, my kids thought of that a couple of years ago. So like I said, middle school ideation is absolutely amazing because they don't have those barriers of, well, it can't be done. They just don't have that experience yet of no's. And so some of their ideation is crazy as to solutions for things, but they've also come now and some of these have become possibilities. And so I think that tapping into that middle school years where they aren't fully formed is a wonderful time to get them to have this experience. I always say that Invent the Future is one of those events that they will remember the rest of their lives. They might not remember what they learned, how to do something in grammar in English, but they will remember going to Invent the Future and seeing all of the inventions from all the other middle schoolers. Dorothy didn't really touch on these events are huge. There are, you know, hundreds of students who come together and show off what they worked on throughout these. It can be up to a semester of work, and they get to show it off to each other, their family members, communities, and their partners. And so that alone, the event alone, is also one of those things that I have really near and dear to my heart, that I think that's something the kids are going to remember the rest of their lives. So anyway, I kind of got off topic there.
No, because I think we invite, you know, we intentionally, I appreciate you calling out, like, you know, we invite intentionally, you know, community leaders, you know, elected officials. We make a big show of it because it is a big deal. And the kids are like, wow, you know, this person who's at the National Institutes of Health came over and talked to me about my project. And, you know, the head of this, you know, VP of Pepco came over and talked to me about my project. And, you know, I think that those are meaningful to the students because they can see themselves also going into those career tracks as well.
In 30 seconds, do you have any advice for someone who's like, this is great, I'm in a district that's not by the Kid Museum, you know, and I know we talked a little bit about like a club opportunity, virtual options during COVID. Do you have any advice for someone sitting in and thinking that?
Yeah. So first of all, if you're far from us, it doesn't mean that we can't work with you. So definitely reach out, tell us your ideas, and we'll definitely brainstorm with you. So I want to say that first and foremost, but I also do want to, you know, speak out to the fact that there are other organizations that are out there that are in your backyard that you can think about partnering with. I think it's unusual in some ways, like some people might have thought about partnering with a museum, with a, you know, a kid focused museum, an educational makerspace. You may may not have a kid-focused educational makerspace in your backyard, but certainly there are lots of organizations that you can partner with to really think about expanding education. And the actual curriculum that we've developed, we definitely are trying to make it more portable and more accessible to scale it up to districts all over the country. So we definitely would love, if you're interested in being a pilot location for something like that, definitely reach out to us, and we're definitely happy to make that happen. I see in the chat someone asked if we can apply for funding for this program, and we definitely would love to talk to you. I think we have partners that are interested in potentially scaling the program in different ways, and so we'd love to talk to you about your ideas. So definitely reach out.
Okay, so amazing. We are just at about time. So I think we have a quick survey. Shayna, I'll let you say what you need to say.
Yes, amazing. I'm so sorry to be the one that has to cut off this amazing conversation, but so glad to hear that there's ways to keep it going. So I'm going to put in the chat our survey, just to hear about what was most helpful for you during this webinar session. And also at the bottom, note that there's 2 registration links for the next 2 webinars happening in this series. Next week at the same time, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern, we'll shift to Tennessee, talking about high quality instructional materials to improve early literacy efforts. And then on the final session, talking about representative and balanced curriculum. Thank you all so much. And I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon. And Joe and Dorothy, amazing to hear about this incredibly comprehensive partnership and program.
Thank you.
Thank you.